Imagine a world lit only by fire, where news traveled at the speed of a horse, and the will of God was seen as the most powerful force on earth. This was the late 11th century, an age of profound faith, brutal warfare, and deep-seated anxieties. In this fervent atmosphere, the Crusades would erupt and reshape the known world for centuries to come. These were not merely wars for territory, they were framed as holy pilgrimages, armed expeditions sanctioned by the highest spiritual authority. Their echoes began in 1095 and continued for nearly 200 years. Their legacy still resonates today, shaping relationships between cultures and faiths. But our story begins not in France or Germany, but in the heart of the Byzantine Empire, the surviving eastern half of Rome, centered on magnificent Constantinople. Pressured by the Seljuk Turks, nomadic warriors, recent converts to Islam, sweeping across the Middle East, conquering vast swathes of land. The Byzantine defeat at Manzikert in 1071 opened Anatolia to invasion and imperiled the empire itself. Emperor Alexios I Komnenos, fearing collapse, sent a desperate plea for help to the west. The appeal reached Pope Urban II, who saw more than aid. He saw a chance to unite Europe's warring knights under a single holy banner. By directing violence outward, he could calm Christendom and elevate papal authority over kings and across the eastern Mediterranean. November 1095, at Clermont, Urban delivered a call that would set Europe ablaze. He described suffering Christians and desecrated holy sites, and summoned the Franks to end their squabbles and march for Jerusalem. He promised remission of sins to those who took the cross, an irresistible spiritual reward in a deeply pious age. Deus vult, God wills it, became the electrifying cry. That cry would echo far beyond that day. Before the great lords finished sharpening their swords, a wildfire of fervor spread among common people. Carried by charismatic preachers, the message resonated with peasants, artisans, and the poor. Peter the Hermit, riding a donkey in simple robes, drew thousands with magnetic zeal. For many, this was a final pilgrimage, a divine apocalypse rather than a military campaign. The People's Crusade, chaotic, unwieldy, women, children, the elderly, few weapons, no training. They set off in spring 1096, long before knightly armies were ready. Lacking logistics, money, leadership, they wandered thousands of unfamiliar miles. In the Rhine Valley, their zeal turned violent. Fueled by anti-Jewish hatred, some bands unleashed pogroms. Convert or die, massacres in Worms, Mainz, and Cologne. It was Europe's first large-scale popular violence against Jews, a grim prelude. Reaching Byzantium, the mob alarmed Emperor Alexios, who had asked for elite mercenaries, not a starving horde. He ferried them into Seljuk-held Anatolia. Discipline failed immediately. Ignoring caution, they rushed into a trap near Civito. The result was slaughter, the People's Crusade annihilated before reaching its goal. As the People's Crusade perished, the main armies finally moved, formidable forces led by ambitious nobles. Godfrey of Bouillon, Bohemond of Taranto, Raymond of Toulouse, knights, infantry, and camp followers in an organized host. They gathered in Constantinople, swore uneasy oaths, and crossed into Anatolia. With Byzantine help, they took Nicaea, 1097. Sun-scorched marches, skirmishes, starvation, disease, and victory at Dorylaeum. Then Antioch, an 8-month ordeal of desperate fighting and treachery. Trapped and near despair, discovery of the Holy Lance revived morale. They sallied out and routed a larger relief army. The path to Jerusalem lay open. Early summer 1099, they beheld the city, held by the Fatimids of Egypt. July 15, 1099, breach and bloodbath. Soldiers, Muslim and Jewish civilians, slaughtered in the captured city. 4 Crusader states arose. Godfrey of Bouillon became ruler of Jerusalem. For decades, the Crusader states survived. Fortified castles like Crac des Chevaliers, a hybrid society under constant threat. Disunity faded. Calls for jihad urged unity to expel the invaders. Saladin, brilliant general, devout Muslim, deft statesman, united Egypt and Syria, encircling the Crusader states by the 1180s. A truce was broken. Saladin launched an invasion. At Hattin, the Crusader army was annihilated, an irreversible disaster. By October 1187, Saladin entered Jerusalem, its recovery marked by discipline, not slaughter. Europe reeled and launched the Third Crusade. Frederick Barbarossa, Philip II, and Richard the Lionheart. Disaster struck. Frederick drowned, Philip quarreled and left, setting a legendary rivalry between Richard and Saladin. Along the coast they tested strength and honor, without retaking Jerusalem. The Third Crusade's truce allowed pilgrims, but not conquest. Pope Innocent III called the Fourth Crusade to strike Egypt, key to the Holy Land. Venice was contracted for a massive fleet, but too few crusaders arrived, and the debt went unpaid. The crusaders, stranded and indebted, became pawns of Enrico Dandolo. A deal: capture Zara to defer the debt. In 1202 they sacked the city, and were excommunicated. Alexios Angelos promised riches, troops for Egypt, and church union, if they put him on the Byzantine throne. Tempted, leaders diverted to Constantinople. Unpaid and entangled in intrigues, they did the unthinkable. They turned weapons on fellow Christians. Constantinople fell to them. For 3 days they plundered treasures, desecrated churches, destroyed art and libraries, mortally wounding Byzantium and widening the East-West divide. The Fourth Crusade never reached the Holy Land, a warning of crusading corruption by greed and ambition. What could make someone leave home, family, everything, to fight in a distant land? Profound piety led the way. The Pope's call felt like God's command. Indulgences promised remission. In a world fearful of damnation, to die on crusade was martyrdom and heaven. Primogeniture left many landless. The East offered lordships, wealth, and titles, plus glory and adventure for a warrior aristocracy. Songs of heroism, chivalry, and social pressure drew lords and vassals alike. Some went as penance. The poor sought escape from famine and servitude. Sieges starved cities for months or years. Bombardment, hunger, and disease killed more than combat. People ate whatever remained. Then sickness spread in filth and fear. If taken by storm, 3 days of plunder and massacre followed, as in Jerusalem 1099 and Constantinople 1204. Whole regions destabilized. Trade routes broke. New borders forced new rulers, new laws, and mass displacement. Jewish communities in Europe and the Middle East faced waves of persecution. Resentments hardened into a bitter legacy that lingered for centuries. Despite being wars of faith, the Crusades created sustained contact between Europe and the Middle East. Venice, Genoa, Pisa grew rich, transporting crusaders and goods. Spices like pepper, cloves, cinnamon. Sugar shifted from medicine to sweetener. Exotic fabrics and new dyes, perfumes and tastes fueled demand that helped spark exploration. Europeans encountered advances in medicine, mathematics, and science. Hygiene habits improved. New crops, apricots, lemons, rice, traveled west. Architecture cross-pollinated. Byzantine and Islamic design, including the pointed arch, influenced Gothic cathedrals. Warfare evolved as Europeans adopted tactics and fortification ideas from the East. Islamic libraries preserved Greek works. Through the Crusader states, Spain and Sicily, they entered Latin, igniting scholasticism and paving the way to the Renaissance. Violent as they were, the Crusades reopened channels of learning after centuries of closure. By the 13th century's end, Crusader lands shrank under Mamluk pressure. Acre fell in 1291, the last major mainland stronghold, ending the grand project of ruling the Holy Land. The Crusades boosted economies, empowering Italian city-states, fostering banking and international trade. Monarchies consolidated power, sometimes at the expense of feudal lords. The papacy's prestige surged, then dimmed with failures and corruptions like 1204. New institutions, Templars and Hospitallers, became major political actors. The Middle East expelled the Crusaders but bore deep scars and a fortified sense of identity and defensive jihad. Byzantium was shattered by 1204, left vulnerable to the Ottomans in 1453. The Crusades were complex: faith and greed, piety and brutality, collision and exchange, reshaping medieval politics and economies, and Christian-Muslim relations for centuries. To study them is to see fanatical devotion beside calculated ambition, and how cultural threads interweave to change history. The echoes of Deus Vult faded, but the world they helped create remains.